Next time you're traveling down Interstate 65 at Harding Place in Nashville, consider this: you're driving through a Civil War battlefield. Many of those battles were fought in the front lawn of our next stop. Travelers Rest is a well-preserved home from a fascinating era, and it always stands ready to share its history. Just a few minutes from downtown Nashville, you'll find a time machine of sorts. An historic mansion that's witnessed almost all of Music City's colorful past.
The house here at Travelers Rest is actually the oldest house open to the public in Nashville. It was built in 1799 and was the home to several generations of the Overton family.
If you're not familiar with the Overtons, you've probably heard of a family friend who, among others, helped Judge Overton found Memphis back in 1819.
John Overton quickly partnered up with Andrew Jackson, and that's usually how history remembers him today.
Staff historian Brian Allison can rattle off a guest list that reads like a 19th century who's who.
Sam Houston has visited this house, the Senator Thomas Hart Benton, Peggy Eaton, some very prominent names during Jackson's years. The house also served a role in the Battle of Nashville. So it's a wide variety of history that we cover here, and it's just a long and fascinating chronicle of Nashville's history all in one spot.
That chronicle goes back much further than you might think. Overton originally named the homestead Golgotha, meaning place of the skulls, due to a number of Indian graves on the site, dating back nearly 1,000 years. But today, Travelers Rest celebrates life, offering a unique opportunity to share its rich history with new generations.
We try to showcase 19th century crafts, trades, and historic figures. So oftentimes we'll have Civil War reenactors and frontier reenactors. There's a gentleman portraying a long hunter here today, and one portraying a gunsmith of that time. I myself am portraying a Civil War surgeon, and a lot of this is hands-on. Sometimes it's there just so the craftsmen can demonstrate for the attendees, but sometimes we'll have the kids pitch in with quill pens and see how difficult it is to write with a feather, or make a handkerchief doll to take home as a souvenir. So it's a wonderful way for them to not just learn about it, reading it in a book, but to come out and actually participate in some of the crafts from the past.
Now, why do you think they would want one of these?
Thankfully, Steve Hall's a gunsmith, not a horn player. But his stories are music to the ears of these youngsters.
This is live history. This is, you're seeing what you read about in a book. You're seeing it live. You can talk about this, you can hear about it, but when you see somebody touching this with their hands and you see the way it actually looked, that makes it come back to life.
Something you can't get in a classroom. It gets them out, it gets them thinking, it gets them involved. And when you see them, faced with those surgical instruments, suddenly a shot doesn't look so bad, Before the Civil War, they didn't have this stuff. So they did have to use this stuff on you when you were awake. Not such a good idea. During the Civil War, they figured this stuff out, and so that made surgery a lot better. So believe it or not, we owe a lot to Civil War surgeons.
And Travelers Rest owes much of its history to the Civil War.
John Overton II, or Colonel John Overton as many call him, he was the owner of the house in 1861 when the war started. Several newspapers list John Overton Jr. as the wealthiest man in the state of Tennessee. He was reported to be worth about $5 million in 1860, which made him very much a target when the Union Army took Nashville, and so in April of 1862, he fled south. Now, he did return in December of 1864, and at that point in time, this house became the headquarters for General John Bell Hood, the commander of the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Hood came here on December 2nd, 1864. He got here literally 2 days after the bloody battle at Franklin, Tennessee, and he was facing an even bigger battle to come at Nashville 2 weeks later. So for that 2-week period, this house served as his command post outside the city, and it was kind of a bizarre social whirl, I've often said, that was taking place here while the armies were shaping up for that battle. One of the strangest stories in the house's history involves a wedding reception. One of Hood's officers married his childhood sweetheart while this was going on, and 2 days before the battle broke broke out, his wedding reception was held in the dining room here at Travelers Rest. The battle itself, for the most part, didn't touch the house. It was hit by a shell during the battle itself, but some very heavy fighting took place on the Overton farm. Today, the location is now the corner of I-65 and Harding Place. That spot was known as Peach Orchard Hill at the time, and on the second day of the battle, some of the bloodiest fighting of the Battle of Nashville took place there. It was also significant for being one of the largest engagements involving the United States colored troops, as they called them, the African-American soldiers that were fighting at Nashville. Now, the way we're looking at it, the battlefield may be gone in many respects, but as long as the words and the stories are there, you can still capture something of what happened in Nashville during the battle. Less about troop movements and armies and more about what soldiers and civilians experienced. We have the coffin of Colonel William M. Shy, who was the highest-ranking Confederate officer killed during the Battle of Nashville. Personal artifacts, excavated artifacts from the battlefield, items carried by soldiers, and the most important thing of all, their words. History is stories, it's people's experiences. I've often told them it's the greatest action movie you've ever seen in your life. And it's a way to approach your past by saying, how did they do it? Now how would I do the same thing? It's the stories of those who came before, and someday that your story will be part of that as well. So there's always something to be learned from history, and to me it's the most fascinating playground I could possibly have.